Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of the Right Stand. I'm Anand Narsimhan. A consulate or a high commission or an embassy of a nation is not a mere building or a few acres of land on foreign soil. It is the symbol of that very country's ethos, a representation of shared values and ties, and it is deemed as that particular nation's territory. And when there's an attack on those buildings and that property, it's an attack on the very idea of that nation itself and the sovereignty, integrity of that nation. In this case, Bharat, a vibrant democracy, the mother of all democracies, the world's largest democracy, and this is what happened in San Francisco. Bharat was attacked. An attempt to vandalize and hurt the image of our country was made by elements who have a secessionist bent of mind. In the wee hours of Monday, the Indian Consulate in San Francisco in the United States was vandalized and set ablaze. Videos show the act of arson at the Indian Consulate. They were widely circulated on social media, and the men behind this mayhem gloated about unleashing that violence. A video with words like "violence begets violence" plastered all over it was released by Khalistan supporters, and this is doing the rounds on social media. The United States government was quick to condemn, making it clear that vandalism and violence against diplomatic facilities or foreign diplomats in the US is a criminal offense. But are words of condemnation enough? A free run to these separatists has been noticed at this very spot in San Francisco a few months ago in March. Agencies believing that there is a possibility that attacks on the Indian Consulate in San Francisco in March and July could be linked. In March, these secessionist elements vandalized the Indian Consulate in San Francisco, while yesterday they indulged in acts of arson. Back then, there was a huge piece of graffiti that was spray painted on the outer wall of the building. In the latest case, video showed an attempt to break into the building. In March, the trigger was Punjab police launching a nationwide search for separatist intended element Amritpal Singh, now absolutely disgraced and now incarcerated. This month, the trigger is the killing of Canada-based Khalistan Tiger Force chief Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And in both cases, the outcome is the same: a loud, deafening silence on the actual action front. India will not take it lying down, though. Indian envoys, not just in San Francisco but also in Washington, immediately raising a red flag. The reaction was the State Department stepping in. What we are also learning from our sources is that the FBI will not treat these criminals with kid gloves. They will no longer be treated merely as protesters. As far as Canada goes, External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar has made it clear that inaction will cause strain in ties, and that's worth considering because there could be a direct fallout on the trade deal, the ACTA or the free trade agreement that is being worked out, and Canada is desperate to get on board that wagon. Now, we had the Canadian Foreign Minister come out and assure safety and security of all Indian diplomats, but they have still not said that they will weed out the secessionist elements out of Canadian soil and hand them over to the Indian authorities. That's not yet been said. Attacks and provocations by these separatist elements are not new, but what seems to be the trigger this time? Let's try and join the dots. 18th of June, Khalistan Tiger Force Chief Hardeep Nijjar is killed in targeted shooting in Surrey in Canada. Hardeep Nijjar was a designated terrorist. Nijjar carried a 10 lakh rupee bounty on his head. The latest flashpoint is also setting the stage for a weekend expected to be marked by anti-India hate. Posters released by Khalistan groups accusing Indian envoys of US, Canada and Australia of playing a role in the killing of Hardeep Nijjar. In the US, the Indian ambassador to the nation, Taranjit Singh Sandhu, has been named on a poster calling for a march from Berkeley to the Indian Embassy in San Francisco. The posters are an invitation to this rally, Khalistan Freedom Rally, planned for the 8th of July, which will take place in Toronto and is expected to culminate at the Consulate General of India. A similar pattern in Australia too, a bid to lay siege to the Indian Embassy in Melbourne, where the General Counsel was singled out. Now, India has issued a démarche to Canada on the planned protest by pro-Khalistan terrorist outfits outside the Indian High Commission in Ottawa and the two consulates in Toronto and Vancouver on the 8th. But can we expect the Trudeau administration to crack the whip? Now, I say that because many would agree that there is a pro-separatist lobby in the power corridors of Canada itself that are propping up this Justin Trudeau government, who have been accused of being in cahoots with these elements. 2015, 4 members of the cabinet linked to Khalistani backers or K-backers. 2017, Trudeau in Toronto kirtan with Khalistani flags. 2017, Trudeau addresses parade with Bindranwale floats. 2018, convicted Khalistani terrorist invited to Trudeau's reception. 2019, Trudeau forms a minority government with K supporter NDP. 2022, K separatist Jagmeet Singh support to Trudeau until 2025. These elements stand out. Another aspect, ladies and gentlemen, is the US state visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The treatment accorded to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the stature and the elevation that India has got on the world stage has not gone down well with these elements who are being backed by an entity who has forever wanted to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. Today the SCO meet happens. The K bogey is not raised by the Pak Prime Minister. But ahead of that SCO meeting, there is vandalism on the other K element, that is the Khalistan element, over in the US of A. Should these dots not be linked? Can this neighbor be trusted when they say they want peace and they want to resume trade? Or are they only waiting to fill up their empty coffers yet again so that they can come back and train their guns again at India? These are questions that remain. Let's go across to Ramneek Singh Maan, activist, Professor Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert, Anand Ranganathan, author, political commentator, and also a scientist with us, and Manjinder Singh Sirsa, spokesperson of the BJP. Professor Brahma Chelani, if I may start with you at the outset. Namaste and Jai Hind, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much. Professor Brahma Chelani, if there were Tibetans outside the Chinese consulate, would America have allowed them to do what they did? Would they have given them a free run? If there were Tibetans outside the Chinese consulate in Toronto or in Vancouver, would the Canadian authorities have allowed it?
You raise a very valid question. We have to put what has happened in San Francisco in a larger context. 4 Anglosphere countries, Canada, the UK, Australia, and the US. In the US is particularly the California region. These 4 countries have become the hub of violent separatist attacks on Indian diplomatic missions and on Indian diplomats. We're seeing a pattern now. We're seeing something that happens in London, then triggering a copycat attack in San Francisco, as happened in March. And we're seeing also a pattern in attacks being carried out in Canada and then being replicated in Australia or elsewhere. The question is, why are these countries allowing violent Khalistani separatists to engage in such open provocations and attacks? It's okay, for Khalistanis to demand Khalistan. That's one thing. But for them to take law into their hands, to stage violent attacks against diplomatic missions is unacceptable. It's a duty of the host country to provide security to diplomatic missions and to diplomats. Now, for example, if you look at this coming July 8th rally, the posters say, "Kill India." And they name Indian diplomats, including the Indian High Commissioner to Canada and the Consul General of India in Vancouver. In other words, Indian diplomats, Indian envoys are being put under mental pressure, damaging their working environment. In other words, they'll be unable to carry out their professional duties in Canada. This is completely unacceptable. And the question that we need to ask ourselves is that, is India doing enough to put pressure on these governments?
No, it's a fair question that we ask. And the other aspect is that why should also do a quid pro quo if the San Francisco India consulate is so vulnerable and open? Why heavily guard the US consulate in Delhi? Allow the Afghans to go and protest outside the US consulate? Allow those who are the indigenous people to come out and present themselves and go ahead and openly protest here at the Canadian Consulate. Take away all the thing. If you can do it with the UK Consulate for a day, let's do it for good. Anand Ranganathan, where do you stand?
Good evening, Anand. Let me begin first by wholeheartedly condemning what is transpiring in Canada, in San Francisco, and a few weeks ago in London. And that kill list being prepared by Khalistanis in Canada, the arson and setting fire to our consulate in San Fran, the desecration of our flag atop of our embassy in the heart of London by Khalistani vandals and hoodlums. This is totally unacceptable. And the British and Canadian Prime Ministers and the American President should have made sure heads rolled for this. In fact, I was going to say, the Indian Prime Minister should make sure that the British and Canadian and US Presidents and Prime Ministers made sure heads rolled for this. But then I suddenly remembered it was the Indian Prime Minister who did nothing, unfortunately, when vandals desecrated our flag at the Red Fort on Republic Day a couple of years ago. So I'm afraid I'm not very hopeful of any action. This is the 7th attack, Anand, on the Indian embassies and consulates in recent times by Khalistanis. Where is the security? How the hell can these people get away by shamelessly making and broadcasting a kill list of Indian officials? Summoning some low-ranked bureaucrats and condemning this attack is not enough, I'm afraid. Trudeau and Biden should be asked to explain these mishaps, because had the same happened in the UK or Canadian or US embassies here in the heart of Delhi and Chanakyapuri, Modi would have been asked to explain it. Jaishankar would have been summoned. Now to the second issue. Anand, remember how it took a month to nab Amritpal Singh? You just mentioned it 10 minutes ago. Yeah. I'm afraid things aren't happening in isolation around the world. They are taking lessons from what is happening in India. What is happening in Punjab is scary. I am a child of the 80s, Anand, and so are you. And let us remember how, for all practical purposes, we thought then that we had lost Punjab forever. Until KPS Gill came along. Sadly, we don't have KPS Gills anymore. There is no doubt that the Punjab state government is proving itself to be wholly inept at handling the law and order in the border state. If it isn't the daily drone attacks, the drug mafia murders, the blasphemy killings, it is the police stations being run over by Khalistani separatists and anarchists to get alleged kidnappers released and not able to nab a Khalistani for a month. And when you do nab him, you find him inside a Gurdwara. The situation is exacerbated by lackadaisical coordination between the state and central forces to top it all. The ISI is working tirelessly to create a compact between the Kashmiri and Sikh diaspora. And finally, Anand, one must not shirk away, I'm afraid, from blaming the center too in all this developing mess. Let us not forget how anarchists and middlemen and Khalistani separatists and supporters were mollycoddled by the center. Their every illegality went unpunished. Modi and Shah weren't able to stop the mob carrying swords and the other weapons from driving to the heart of the capital of India and hoisting a flag illegally at the Red Fort, a symbol of our democratic independent identity. The inevitable vacuum that is created when justice and rule of law whooshes away gets filled by anarchy and bloodshed, and that is exactly what happened. Worse, just 20 seconds. Many of the cases against the rioters were then withdrawn. Worse still, the Supreme Court stayed a silent spectator in all this mayhem. How can we claim, Anand, to be a great power when a mob removes our flag at home and abroad, prepares a kill list, and we stay silent?
So here's the thing, Anand. A lot of what you say, I would like to echo all of that, but there is one aspect. Perhaps they were waiting for one bullet to be fired and one bullet to claim a life and to turn the whole narrative into yet another violent victim game in the national capital, where all you could do is weather the storm at that point in time. Nobody liked the insult to the national flag. Nobody liked the vandalism or the attempt to try and scale the red forts and get onto the ramparts. But yes, there is one aspect that hurts Manjinder Singh Sirsa. The fact is that the Khalistanis are being allowed to appropriate the whole Sikh narrative. They are being allowed to say that they represent all of the Sikhs, which is such a fallacy. They're not even 0.5% of whatever the Sikh sentiment across the world is. But why are they being allowed to get a free run? What is happening from within the community? I ask this of you not as a national spokesperson of the BJP, but also a member of the SGPC.
Very true. Nasim, the biggest challenge is this. You have seen what happened yesterday. They have posted the picture of two of the diplomats of Canadian High Commission. The only it is not 0.5%. I must say there must be only 200 or less than 100 people who are mostly on the payroll of ISI. they are so violent in nature. No Sikh, I know the maximum Sikhs of diaspora are against this kind of illegal acts because it is demeaning our religion also. It is in entire, if I say, I being a Sikh sitting here in India, but the Sikhs sitting abroad are also conscious about their image. It is tarnished like anything. We are projected like terrorists outside the world. Reason being why? But because few of the people who are wearing turbans and doing this kind of a thing, I would have never imagined that the government, the flag which saved hundreds of lives from Afghanistan, the Prime Minister of India, I'm in debt to him, I'm thankful to him. In spite of all this, this one man took a courage to bring those people who were in Afghanistan. They were not Indian nationals at all. But the only thing common was their religion belongs to this nation, and that was the reason Prime Minister went all the way to save them. And today, these people who are doing this, how would they justify even being a Sikh? Sometimes I feel ashamed, I feel embarrassed by sitting in front of a TV when people talk like this, because they are rightly saying, what else can a government do? Being this government, I do not understand what those people want actually. They are on the payroll of ISI, they are paid, but the only difference is there are Sikhs in diaspora who are very hurt by this, but they can't do because these guys are so violent. If the entire country like Canada is playing in their hands, now will you imagine that any normal Sikh will come out and say कि मैं इनके खिलाफ बोलता हूँ? No, that is not. If you remember, Narasimhan, there was a couple who posted a very
I'm not asking ordinary Sikh families or individuals to come out and say. What has the Sikh religious heads, what have they said? Has there been a position taken against position against those who don't wear a patka but they wear a bandana and then pose as somebody who are fighting for justice of Sikhs? Why is there no outright condemnation saying that they are an insult to the to Sikh itself? And anybody associating with them is not a Sikh. Has that statement been released? Was there a statement released against Amritpal also?
Nobody will release this statement.
There are people who are actually giving him legal cover, who are members of the Sikh community, the religious heads, who are wanting to say, let's go and give him legal cover.
Definitely.
So are these people then openly backing secessionists?
Yes, there is a political cause behind this because Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee is controlled by Shiromani Akali Dal. And now because Shiromani Akali Dal is not aligned with BJP, it is like something that हम आपके खिलाफ हैं, तो फिर हम सबके आप सारे कामों के खिलाफ हैं. It is like this. And the message which our religious heads are giving, it is totally going against our religion also, against our fundamentals also. See, everybody is scared, but they, as you said, very well said, that they are out in a position where they should not be scared. They should speak truth and they should come out and condemn this kind of incident. I have not seen anybody, apart, see, there are 2 member parliaments from Shiromani Akali Dal. None of the parliament came out from Shiromani Akali Dal and said that we condemn this. How can you justify this? And people sitting in that authority, if they don't come out and condemn this, it means that in silent you are with them. I am absolutely.
Sir, are you seeing the larger game, sir?
That is the reason we are blamed for.
No, I hope they're all seeing the larger game. This K2 principle formula is coming in. Kashmir पे ज़्यादा नहीं बोल सकते हो आप खालिस्तान को खेलना शुरू करो और सिखों को भड़काओ. This game is a very dirty, nasty game against Bharat and its people, sir. That putting one com against another and using this.
So I have myself seen. No, I have to seen with my bare eyes. When there was an incident, when Prime Minister was there was protest going against Prime Minister.
What is being done about it?
And ISI was giving them dollars.
What are we as a country doing about it, sir, is a question. Sirsa Sahab, I'll come to you. Ramnik Man, before I come to you. See, yes, Anand wanted to say something and then I'll come to you, Ramnik.
Yes, I speak as a common man, as a layman, because we already have Mr. Chaleni as the expert here, Anand. But I briefly wanted to say this. With due respect to my good friend, Mr. Sirsa, I have never seen him as a Sikh. I have seen him as a proud Indian. And if I may say so, that itself is the nub of the issue. Why is the government, Mr. Sirsa, seeing these people as Sikhs or as Muslims or as Hindus or anyone? They are vandals, and the government that is perpetrating them, sir, you must take them to task. You've seen the horrible video of what has happened to San Francisco Consulate, sir. They have burnt it to the ground. Just imagine if the Canadian embassy or the US embassy at Chanakyapuri had met the same fate. What do you think would have happened? What do you think Biden would have done? We have to take action, sir, not against Sikhs or Hindus or Muslims. I see you as an Indian. Please stand
But against
for us.
terrorists.
Yeah. So against terrorists,
Definitely,
against... Yeah.
Anand, I'm in agreement with you. Give me 10 seconds.
Ji.
He's absolutely right. Yeah, being a Sikh sometimes, see, you say that's right, there are terrorists mean terrorists. But when you see somebody wearing a turban and doing this kind of act, I myself feel ashamed that now entire country, entire nation, entire world be seeing a Sikh as a terrorist, not as a terrorist, because we got a different identity, we got a unique identity. And that's the problem here with us. We are facing this problem, and I must say that government is committed to fight against them, and that is the reason the day Prime Minister took a decision and removed all barricades against the British High Commission, they were on toes, and more than 100 police persons were outside the England and the British Embassy. And now same will happen here also. The moment the government will take action and withdraw their security against the American Embassy, they will put their people outside our mission also. This has to be done. Either you have no choice. No nationalist Indian will ever able to fight these kind of people. After all, government has to fight. It is not an individual fight. No individual can fight. No individual even dares to speak against them.
Sir, जिन्होंने इस देश, we see India as it is today because of the sacrifice of the Sikhs. जिन्होंने इस देश को एक करके रखने के लिए अपनी generations को कुर्बान कर दिया. And those families today are seeing somebody posing and using this identity to do secessionist work, Ramni Kumar. And they are getting away with it on foreign soil.
Okay. Good evening, Anand. Thank you for the time. Now, there are a few things which should be spoken out very, very clearly. Pehli cheez, to begin with, you know, these Khalistanis have been trying very hard in cahoots with the Pakistani ISI and some Western agencies, including a few people in the West who have interest in destabilizing India, to extract a reaction from either the Indian majority community and isolate Sikhs further, and then portray that Sikhs are being victimized in India, number one. Number two, can you please not disturb, sir? Thank you. And number one. Number two, and extract a reaction from the Indian state. So this is something they've been doing. For example, take for instance the case of vandalizing temples in Canada, Australia and the US. And then take for example, getting on top and trying to pull down the flag of the Indian Embassy in London, the Indian High Commission in London. And then similarly, they're trying to gherao or trying to block the Indian High Commission in Australia. They have now gone one step further and they have issued terror threat against senior Indian diplomats in Australia, in Canada and in the US, namely Taranjeet Sandhu, TV Nagendra Prasad in the US, Canada mein, Sanjay Kumar Yadav, Mrs. Apurva Srivastava in Canada, Australia, Manpreet Vora and Dr. Sushil Kumar. And then they went further. And then they actually went to San Francisco and they tried to burn the Indian mission there down. Now, the question is, the diplomatic relations between two countries are based on reciprocity. If the Americans or the Canadians, for whatever political or personal reasons, are not able to safeguard, then the Ministry of Home Affairs should move a letter and ask them, should we deploy CISF or CRPF there to protect our officers and our missions or our properties there in the US, or are you going to provide sufficient security, number one. Number two, if they fail to do that in a given or a stipulated time frame, well, the concept or the principle of reciprocity demands that we withdraw the security cover, the heavy security cover that we provide to the US Consulate, the US Embassy in India, or the Australian High Commission, or the Canadian missions here in India. Let's be fair. Let's give them the treatment they give us. It's as simple as that. Now, moving further, now there are people who are getting funds. They're getting money to do this, number one. Number two, there are others who are asylum seekers. They portray themselves as somebody who want a separate Sikh nation, and then they try to bargain with the Western powers to get asylum there or get, a longer stay in their country. The third point, sir, is that in the Canadian internal politics, में the NDP, Jagmeet Singh is supporting Justin Trudeau in a minority government. He does not have a majority there. So it is his compulsion there. But you forget, when you rear snakes in your backyard, they come and bite you hard. This is exactly what is going to happen eventually in Canada. This is happening already in the UK. This will happen in the US. The law and order situation that is being created for the citizens of the US, the Canadian citizens, the French citizens, if I may, and also the Australian citizens, time alone will tell that these decisions that they make today, the leverage or the long rope that they're giving to the Khalistanis today, it is going to come back and bite them very, very hard. They need to be prepared for it.
I just go
and
back.
Again,
I'm just going back and I'm going to bring in Professor Brahmacharlani. There is something that we are not doing right, Professor Brahmacharlani. If, especially after the Prime Minister's state visit, there is going to be a certain amount of discomfort. What happened in Australia, Sydney, there are landmark visits that have happened in the Asia Oceania, in that region also, with PNG, the trip to Papua New Guinea, and then the US state visit. It's happened one after the other. And all those people who are instrumental, they have been targeted. But Professor Brahmacharlani, outside the White House lawns, soon after the PM left, there were groups who were allowed to assemble and shout slogans against the Prime Minister. Will that be tolerated by the Indian by the American government if we allow a free run for such elements here? So why are we dithering from reciprocity? This principle of reciprocity, sir.
Prime Minister Modi has gone out of his way to build closer partnerships with UK, Canada, Australia, and the US. Now, one can argue that the Americans were taken by surprise when the San Francisco Consulate was first attacked on March 19th. But this is the second time in 3.5 months that the Consulate of India in San Francisco is attacked.
Yeah.
And this time there is arson. And look at the American response. The American response talks about reported vandalism and attempted arson. Attempted arson. Even though there are videos of the blazing fire that the Khalistanis set inside the Indian consulate compound. The question that we need to ask ourselves, why aren't we responding in a befitting manner? I don't think withdrawing security from the embassies of US, Canada, Australia, and the UK is the answer, because we don't want to create any vulnerability that might be exploited by nefarious elements. But for example, why are we still keeping free trade negotiations with the UK on the fast track? Why are we still eager to have a free trade agreement with Canada? Shouldn't we be openly saying, or at least signaling, that unless the UK and Canada in particular, because these two countries have become the hub of violent Khalistani separatists, unless these two countries do not clean up their act, that India's relations with them would suffer. Cooperation would be suspended in certain key areas. We need to signal. And I think that diplomatic signaling is not happening. These host countries are merely condemning. For example, if you look at the Canadian Foreign Minister, he says that this so-called Kill India rally on July 8th and the targeting of Indian envoys is unacceptable. Unacceptable. That's all. The fact is that this is against law and order. This is against the joint commitment to fight terrorism. When you target Indian diplomats openly, you try to create a scenario where assassinating Indian diplomats is fair game. This is encouraging terrorism. On one hand, you are saying that we are partners in fighting terrorism.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you're allowing terrorist activity to go on your territories.
So
This is unacceptable.
absolutely. So I'm running out of time. So I just quickly want from all four of you one step that you would want the government to take, which would send a clear signal to nations like the UK, US, and Canada. Professor Brahmachalani, Ramnik Maan, Manjinder Sirsa, and then Anand Ranganathan. Yeah.
I think we should suspend free trade negotiations with UK and Canada. As far as the US and Australia are concerned, we should put on hold any new deals or agreements. That would be sufficient.
So that's what. So go slow on the other aspect, the economic aspect. Ramnik Maan.
Yeah, I agree. I tend to agree with Professor Saab. I think, we need to also pinch them where it hurts the most. We need to pinch their purse. India is a very large market, and we need to make sure that we don't buy anything from them. We stop any purchases from them, and any deals in the pipeline should be stopped immediately unless, there are corrective measures which are visible.
Right.
Which are clearly visible.
Right.
Especially designating, please hear me out, designating such outfits as designated terror outfits, and not just somebody who's a protester or either trying to protest for something which they rightfully deserve. They should be branded as terrorists.
Branded as terrorists, brand them as terrorists. Manjinder Sirsa.
I think a very small act, just withdrawing their security of American High Commission. He can't even move 1 inch without Indian security here in Delhi or anywhere in India. I think he should be taught a lesson that if you will do this kind of act, we are reciprocal and we are just withdrawing your security. Now you go out and see how can you move around in a city, and then they will come and go behind you that please hamari jaan chodo. I think this should be a reciprocal, and they need to take a good lesson.
How about the Akali Dal and the Akal Takht take a position for a change in the interest of Sikhi rather than these vandals? Yes,
So
Anand Ranganathan.
If TV channels keep on, sorry.
Ji.
While my mind does incline towards what Professor Cheleni is saying about the free trade agreements and suspending it, the fact of the matter is that very quickly we would run out of partners to actually have free trade agreements, because almost every powerful nation is our adversary. I mean, we see what happened in the case of China. China killed our soldiers brazenly. China is behaving like an enemy country. We saw that it refused to designate a terrorist, a Pakistani terrorist, as a terrorist. But what is happening on the other hand? Are we threatening a trade blockade? No. Our trade balance with China is the highest ever. So, if we don't want to be accused of double standards, so I would go with Mr. Sirsa out here as a very limited first step. Because it is unacceptable that on US soil, somebody can burn down a consulate. It is unheard of. And they have done it. We need to remove the security of the US embassy.
Or let's have a few more instances like Hardeep Nijjar. For every time you throw a rocket into our consulate or put out a poster, you will have a few more kicking the bucket. So, we take matters into our own hands in our own way, tacit way. Plausible deniability always applies. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, but something needs to be done. We're going to take a quick move on and then come back on the SEO conversation in a